Thank you very much, Ronen. Absolutely impressive. What can I say now? We always have this feeling that we know everything and suddenly we find out that we don't. But there is a huge gap, or a certain gap, that I would like to make note of. Because there is a big gap between how this event was perceived, and I'm talking to you, Ronen, and how you just presented it. And if you noticed, on this agenda that we had, up to this point, there was a different sort of atmosphere. Now the atmosphere is changing, and it just shows that we have some sort of a problem. I do believe that it's true to say, and someone said, maybe Ron said, that sometimes the kinetic or cyber means serve the purpose of cognition rather than the cognition serving the cyber. And there are such events like this one, where we always say that the main effort is the military one. The shooting, the destruction, and cognition needs to serve that purpose. And sometimes there are events when the main effort is cognition, and shooting or not shooting should serve that purpose. And this event is more like the second kind, where the main effort should have been the cognitive part. And again, even during your presentation, we are still in the counter, sort of responsive stance rather than the proactive one. And I think that what Ron said is true. What about our story? And I want to say something that I was going to say in advance. I know that when we do cognition, we do it vis-a-vis several target audiences, local audiences, the enemy, the Arab world, the international theater. And by the way, there's a problem because sometimes a message directed at one target audience is interpreted by another completely differently. Bardawil is talking to his local audience, and in terms of the international arena, he is causing problems, and the same happens for us. We have a problem with messages we convey to different audiences. With outside audiences, we also have a problem. Some people call it anti-Semitism, but people like to hate us, let's just say that. I mean, we're easy to hate, more than others perhaps. And that's why it is very easy to feed all sorts of atrocities and stories about us to the world. And we said that, I mean, our story is not that great. You heard the foreign ministry spokesman who has to explain us abroad. Our story isn't that great. We have a lack of policy, because when you try to explain something, you need to understand what your policy is, and we don't have one. Our policy is reactive. It's not proactive. We don't tell anyone what we want to happen in Gaza. We keep these cards close to our chest, if we even have a chest. We're not creative enough. And I do think, and that's what I'd like to say, is that our mechanism, although it sounded here very, very efficient, it isn't. And the IDF spokesman cannot be the one responsible for the war on cognition on the national level. It's not the IDF, it's not a political organization, and cognition has a lot to do with politics, because many messages must be political. And the IDF spokesman doesn't engage in politics and shouldn't engage in politics. The second point is that it strives to preserve its credibility, and therefore it takes it a long time to investigate what happened and to get the right answers and to bring about the right sort of picture. And in this world, it means that often it's already irrelevant, because by the time you get the actual data, it's irrelevant. But the IDF spokesman cannot lie, and it's good that it cannot lie, because we know organizations that start lying and they start lying about everything. We want our army to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. Now, the next thing is that we have a problem with the ability to synchronize between all of these organizations. I don't think the IDF should be the coordinator. And in Israel, we have a problem where when something doesn't happen very well in this country, the IDF sort of assumes responsibility. And it shouldn't be that way. The IDF should not be assuming responsibility for synchronizing between all the different organizations in Israel that engage in cognition. And by the way, there are many such organizations. It's not just Yarden Vatikai sitting in the Prime Minister's office. There are so many ministries, so many organizations and representatives speaking on behalf of Israel, and it is difficult to synchronize and coordinate between them, not only on this effort, but other ones as well. And there's also no sort of umbrella organization that nationally coordinates and synchronizes and sets policy and sets the view and can synchronize all of these efforts. We haven't gotten to that level yet, and I must ask myself, why? For many years, I keep asking why, because we're an amazing country, and when we decide to do something, we can do it. And I don't understand why, in this respect, we cannot decide to do something. I mean, we have wonderful people on various levels doing their work so well, so diligently, but somewhere up at the top, someone is not allowing us to really set up the mechanism, the perception, and the process needed to understand that this is a time in which cognition is so much more relevant, because there's no mediation, and where the visual is so dramatic, and if we don't know how to work correctly, we become irrelevant in our own story. And the story is very important. And by the way, and I'll tell you something else, I don't know if you're aware of this, and maybe I'm mistaken, you can correct me. Even when it comes to the fire in the Gaza envelope, if the IDF does not assume responsibility and get all these vehicles that can quickly get to the fire and extinguish it, then we have a problem with the fire. And by the way, there's a whole story with the fires in all sorts of directions. Is it okay to talk about it? Because it encourages the other side to burn, to cause more fires. And you know the whole story of the kite versus the aircraft. And if you don't know it, then we have some young people in the INSS talking about and discussing and researching cognition, and we have a publication that we have had many responses from around the world on. And I think it is time that the state of Israel take this as it took cyber and as it took other issues, and for it to understand that this warfare or struggle or the story of cognition is a key one and must be taken care of seriously in an organized fashion, to build a method, to build a policy, to build a mechanism that we don't have today. And maybe we need to have a national headquarters set up. Sometime in the past, I did some headquarter work for Ehud Barak when he was Minister of Defense, and every time I went to other organizations, they kept explaining why they cannot assume responsibility, but why they think the other organizations shouldn't be doing it either, which is also important. I think that there are all sorts of private, personal initiatives on other things as well that are trying to converge citizens who are telling all sorts of stories, telling our story in all sorts of social media realms. And the social media is certainly a very important tool in this world, and we should encourage that. Also, the whole matter of shared learning, lesson learning, also is part of this item on the agenda. And the fact that we're sitting here today is saying, okay, maybe we're still in the middle of everything, but let's draw some lessons and conclusions, and let's try to carry on from an improved position by learning the lessons. And what's really very central is that we should be looking at cognition, at this battle of cognition, not only within the actual event, because like many other issues, there is the preliminary, there is the accompanying or the online, real time, and there is the post. We need to think about the challenges ahead, to prepare ourselves for it, to build our story, to make sure it's well-oiled and real, and to be able to convey the message at the right time, before, during, and after. Just like we always say in the military about the ongoing campaign, which is probably the main campaign, because it's not like we're before or after or during wars. We are in an ongoing campaign that has to cope with all of these challenges, and part of the cognitive effort is during this ongoing campaign, and it needs to always be there. And I think that we should really sort of inject into the story more and more our angles, our perspectives, and it's difficult, and we have some satisfaction and some good feeling, but I can tell you, just to conclude, that we have returned from a meeting, I don't want to say exactly where, but a very central place in Europe, and we were criticized, and it always sort of gives me the shivers, and also makes my blood pressure go up. But when we are looked at, and when people say to us that we're not acting like a democracy, we're not following the international laws, and we expect you to do things differently than others, it's kind of annoying. But on the other hand, we want to be different. We don't want to be like the other side, because our advantage is who we are. So thank you all very much for the symposium. Danny and his group, and the IDF spokesman and everyone else, and we'll see you soon.